Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
Fridays to me, talking about the Bills. What else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play action.
Allen. Deep downfield. Wide open.
Welcome into another edition of the Going Deep podcast. Kevin Masseri here, as always, with Mike Bunt for part 3 of the training camp edition, countdown to training camp. As always, we only have now, Mike, only about 13 days to training camp, and it's getting close. We're getting right around the corner. Lots to like, but we have to break down the ESPN list that came out about the top 10 players as interviewed across the league at each position group. Some couple of good tidbits there, as well as maybe a little bit of Von Miller's comments from his article that dropped, as well as maybe Leslie Frazier later on in the show. But first and foremost, Mike, how you feeling today?
I'd be feeling a lot better if I didn't flip an ATV on Saturday. So in some pain right now, I'm not going to lie, but I finally figured out how to stop the sun from coming into my office here. So that's an improvement for our show overall. So other than the entire half side of my body in huge pain, I'm doing good.
We do have a great view of the Ohio University diploma, I'm assuming. So let's make sure that the sun doesn't block that.
Yeah, we need to see that. Proud OU Bobcat, as much as that pains you, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, man, what am I going to do with that information? I need to hang up counteract it with my UB diploma to kind of counteract that. But lots to go through, Mike, as Countdown to Training Camp continues. Part 3 here on the Going Deep podcast, brought to you by Cover One. Also, get out there. We have some special announcements. We do have at Uncle Jimbo's. We're going to have a tasting next Saturday for everybody in town that would like to meet up with all the Cover One shows, from Going Deep podcast to the Air Raid Hour to Cover One Buffalo, etc. The roundup as well. A lot of different people are going to be in there, so make sure you go out and head out to there to taste, as well as be out there Saturday to meet some people if you're interested in the area. But as always, Mike, we really appreciate everybody tuning in. Smash that like button so we can continue to bring you great content all season long as we're really getting into the thick of it. And finally, we're churning and we're seeing some topics to talk about. There's more stuff coming out, more articles. We're almost, we'll say, through the dead of it. But this panel of people, from executives to former scouts, etc., who were interviewed about the top 10 players at each position group across the NFL. And this is what's really interesting to me, is we're going to start at the top at the quarterback position, and we're going to talk about the top 10 list there. Obviously, Josh Allen comes in at 3. And Mike, while you chat about what you think about that, I'll read you off the rest of the list. So Mike, what's your original opinion on Josh Allen coming in at 3rd?
So first, I want to say thanks to Matt and Vlad. I'm tough, but I'm not that tough. I've been a wimp the last couple of days, but I appreciate the comments. But I feel like number 3 is a perfectly fair ranking for Josh Allen overall. You look at the quarterbacks that he's sandwiched in between. Obviously, you got Mahomes number 2, and you have Tom Brady number 4. I mean, anywhere in the top 5 would have been respectable, I felt, for Josh Allen. Aaron Rodgers has won back-to-back MVPs. No argument with him being number 1. Mahomes has the 2 Super Bowl appearances. I'm fine with him being number 2. I honestly thought that they could have had Brady number 3 or higher just because of his career achievements. But yeah, 3 seems perfectly fair. I felt like you could have gone any way you really wanted at 1 through 4.
Yeah, and as you continue down the list, as you've already mentioned, Tom Brady 4, you got Joe Burrow 5, Matt Stafford 6, Justin Herbert 7, as well as Russell Wilson 8th, Deshaun Watson making an appearance at 9, as well as Dak Prescott at 10. Honorable mentions to Lamar Jackson, Derek Carr. Kyler Murray also receiving votes was Kirk Cousins, who kind of rounds out, as always, kind of sits right in that top 12 to 15 range. But just for a reference, this isn't necessarily ESPN. I know that there's a lot of like, oh, ESPN. This isn't an ESPN per se. They put it together and they obviously did the data and the research. However, this is former executives, 50 league executives, coaches, scouts, and players that actually voted on this. So it isn't necessarily just Mike Rodak or somebody's opinion. This is people that have had positions in the league, as well as scouts and others. So it is kind of a compilation to get to this list, not just kind of Kevin or Mike's opinion. That's kind of what a good slew, a good sample size. Obviously you want more the better, but around 50 is a good number to kind of actually kind of weed out some of those highs and the lows. So that's kind of the top 10 quarterback list. No huge shock there. Maybe Lamar Jackson on the fringe there.
I thought Jackson probably deserved to be top 10. I know he's coming off a down season, but I thought to be outside the top 10 was a little bit of disrespect for a former MVP. He was playing hurt last year. I know the numbers don't line up, but he's a top 10 quarterback. I like to have Joe Burrow 5th, but I think that's a little bit high early in this point of his career. I think he will be a top 5 quarterback, but I was surprised to see him at number 5 at this point. Herbert being 7, I thought he might even be a spot or 2 higher. And now obviously Deshaun Watson falling to 9. That's you didn't play last year effect, because I think if this was done a year or 2 ago, most people would have Deshaun Watson in that top 5.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's interesting though, is, are they taking just last year into account? Because they might be a little bit, but at the same time, then if they're not, then someone like Lamar Jackson should be higher. Deshaun Watson could be a little bit higher. So I guess it is a little bit more recency bias there on the list, I would assume, with Burrow being high, Lamar being off, Kyler kind of struggling down the stretch. So there's definitely seems to be pretty like last year-ish there on the quarterback rankings. But overall, nothing really too shocking by what former executives have to say about that position group. But we have to turn our attention. We don't have obviously receiver comes out tomorrow. Tight ends on the 14th. Would be interesting to see where Dawson Knox ends up in that list. Receiver with Stephon Diggs. Offensive tackle with Deion Dawkins. Those 3 have yet to be released. So those 3 will come out. Maybe we'll recap them a little bit on next week's show. But we also have to talk about off-ball linebacker now, which also came out last week as well. That list is very interesting to me. You got Darius Leonard, probably the reigning number 1 overall linebacker in the league, coming in there. That's fine. Micah Parsons, second. Interesting raise for him. Fred Warner, another very stout linebacker. Devin White. So the list is pretty good. Roquan Smith makes an appearance at the top 5 as 5. Demario Davis has had a long-standing career, continues to always get better somehow, even in his 30s. Tremaine Edmonds makes an appearance here at 7th. Bobby Wagner at 8th. Levante David at 9. Jordan Brooks, young Seattle linebacker, comes in there at 10, pushing out Eric Kendricks, Devondre Campbell, CJ Mosley, Patrick Queen, Jeremiah Osu-Koromoa from Cleveland, Aloakan from Jacksonville, Perryman, Deion Jones. Also receiving a few votes was Matt Milano, Miles Jack, a couple other, Isaiah Simmons, a couple other names, Shaq Thompson, and Nick Bolton. So lots of names there. Some guys left off. Jordan Brooks makes an appearance in the top 10 linebackers. And more importantly, Tremaine Edmonds is the 7th best linebacker in the league. What do you guys think? 7th. Mike, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, this one got a lot of traction on social media the day that this was released, because Bills fans like to eat Tremaine Edmonds alive. But across the league and among executives, national media, Tremaine Edmonds gets a lot of respect. It's almost like the anti-Josh Allen movement when he first came into the league, when Bills fans were high on what Josh was becoming, and the rest of the league was a little bit delayed and hesitant to crown him as one of the star quarterbacks in the league. It's clear. I mean, people across the league think that Tremaine is good. Now, I don't think he's a top 10 linebacker in my opinion, but it is nice to see him make this list. But I still think he has to prove himself before I would put him in a top 10 list like this. I do think he's a good player that has the ability to be above average. But if there was a Bills linebacker I expected to make this list, I would have said Matt Milano, not Tremaine Edmonds. And with Milano, he wasn't even honorable mention. He received some votes, but a little surprising. You can tell sometimes there's a disconnect between Bills fans and what the rest of the league thinks.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think that, you follow me and, the two players I've been harsh on in my time here covering the team, Levi Wallace, always down on Levi Wallace. I thought he was overrated by this fan base at times. I think he struggled, was made up by other top safety combination we'll get into here in a moment, as well as having a corner one, then always have to play the best receiver on the other team, etc. And then Tremaine Edmonds, I just needed to see more from him. Even their coach, Leslie Frazier, admitted you needed more splash plays. You needed to be better, more sure in tackling, but really did play pretty solid at times in Tremaine Edmonds. And I was less critical of him last year than I was in previous years. So I do think that he missed some plays, left some stuff on the field, as did everybody. Was he the seventh best? But I think those moments that show you that Tremaine Edmonds is a top 10 linebacker in the NFL has obviously stuck out in the minds of the voting panel here to put him as the seventh best linebacker. I mean, what's going to be interesting, Mike, also is how is all this going to match up to the NFL top 100 list, which is very similar.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because when you look at Tremaine Edmonds, you think this guy's a physical freak. Like, he should be one of the star defenders in the entire NFL. And sometimes you have a preconceived notion. Obviously, he's been in, I believe, 2 Pro Bowls, whether his play matched up to him earning that spot or not. But he's one of those guys that he's still really young, as crazy as it is to say, entering this point in his career. He's still really young for his position. There's players that get drafted that are around his age, a year younger than what he is, and he's already completed 4 seasons in the NFL. So it's not that Tremaine Edmonds isn't a good player or a productive player. It's just that I think expectations for him were so high coming out of college, coming out of Virginia Tech, that it was almost impossible for him to live up to expectations in his first 2 years. But I really think Bills fans have been hoping that he was going to elevate his play to a much higher level. If he's what he is now, I can live with it. But I will say I was hoping for more. He struggles to shed blockers. Every once in a while, he can make a splash play. But I think what Bills fans are hoping for is a little bit more consistency. And I think when you have certain people critical of that lack of consistency, it can be misconstrued by others that he's not a good player when that's not the case. It's just about bringing it all together. And hopefully there is a room for him to continue to progress. But it might be what you see is what you get. And that might just be something that we have to learn to accept as Bills fans.
Well, Mike, it's going to segue us to the extension talk. We're on him. We have to talk about it here. We're not going to ignore the fact that that's kind of a topic that people want to hear our opinions on, the extension. Does it happen preseason? Does it not happen at all? What is your final take going into 2022's NFL season? What's your take on if the Bills should extend him or if they shouldn't? Like, where do you stand on that? And if so, are you willing to be one of those people that wait till the end and kind of all the complete package and maybe have to pay more or maybe get a better deal? Or are you one of those people that are like, I'd rather it done in the next couple of weeks?
So I don't think it needs to be done in the next couple of weeks. I look at this right now where Edmonds is probably coming to the table saying, I've made 2 Pro Bowls. I'm still super young. I still have all this untapped potential. I deserve to get paid good money. And I've been a key linebacker on the number 1 defense in the NFL. So Edmonds has some good points to be made, but I don't think the Bills are in the position right now to where they should just give him top linebacker money. I think he is in a prove-it type situation this year, and I really want to see what he does in a contract year. There were some points in the comments where, do fans really know what his role is or his impact or what he's being asked to do on a weekly basis? And I tend to think maybe most people don't really fully recognize what he brings to this defense. But even with that said, there's a lot of players next year that are going to have to get contracts or extensions in the next year or two. I think right now you let it play out. You try to figure out this year, who are those guys? Is it going to be Ed Oliver? Is it going to be Dawson Knox? Is it going to be Tremaine Edmonds? And hopefully it brings out the competitive juices and you get them all to play at a super high level and to where you have to have some tough decisions. Eventually the Bills are going to have to take some gambles. I think Tremaine Edmonds will end up being on the Bills long-term, but I don't think it's going to be something that happens overnight. I think more likely it's something that he'll earn it by having a strong year on the field this season for the Bills.
Yeah, I think it's simple for me. I am not an extend Tremaine Edmonds guy. I don't believe they have the assets. They have allocated them elsewhere. They've determined that they'd like to spend, obviously last year on Matt Milano, Trey White has been extended. The money is going to count there. They have safeties to worry about. They just invested a first-round pick into Kyer Elam. That's nothing you need to pay today, but that is going to be potentially future money there. I don't believe, you have Ed Oliver coming up. You have offensive side of the ball to worry about. Von Miller now on how many years he'll play. I don't believe that they'll be able to afford him. If for some reason he's in range and they're able to sign him to a deal, maybe he doesn't play outstanding this year, but decent, I believe that obviously increases the odds, just like it does with Milano. I do believe that they've made that decision. I don't know how much Terrell Bernard is going to factor into this, as he's been more of a Matt Milano clone than he would be a Tremaine Edmonds replacement, more of a third linebacker, can come in for Milano if injuries. I do believe that they'll address his role next year. You can't always be looking 4 years ahead on every single position group, and the Bills have been pretty good for the most part across the board. But I do believe you can't have, I always use this example, you can't have Tremaine Edmonds behind Tremaine Edmonds and then Tremaine Edmonds is your third string. You're going to have to make a change next year, but I don't have them having the money to extend Tremaine Edmonds, especially if he thinks he's in that top 7 range and he thinks he's going to get 12, 14, 18. I just don't see it. I think the Bills are going to use their assets elsewhere. They have Gabriel Davis to worry about soon, Dawson Knox to worry about soon, as well as what's going to happen at guard. They've already just given Bates a little bit of a deal for only playing 4 games. We talked about that last week's show about the offensive line a little bit. So there's moves that are going to need to be, and then obviously what Saffold is, they might need to even another guard anyways. So I don't believe that they're going to be able to have the money there to invest into Tremaine Edmonds. I do believe that that's going to be a hole they'll need to replace next year, especially if he is looked at as the 7th best linebacker in the league and plays even that or better this season. I don't believe it's very realistic to get the range that we're talking about here with that he might be asking for in his younger years. So, Mike, for me, unless something else changes my mind or he takes some type of extension now, bridge extension that for some reason he wanted the security and the Bills felt good about a number that's a lot lower than I'm thinking, I don't see that deal getting done, Mike. So I don't know.
It's interesting. And that's why there's still a lot of moving pieces. And I think that's a big reason why it hasn't gotten done yet. We have to see how a lot of these players with their contract seasons coming up and contracts and money all up in the air. We got to see how it plays out. Obviously, if some of these guys end up having horrible years, well, it won't be that difficult of a decision at the end of the season. So it'll all play out, and eventually we'll see. If Tremaine Edmonds goes out and plays like one of the top 5 linebackers in football this year, I bet you the Bills will find a way to give him his money. If he goes out, though, and plays like a middle-tier player after 5 seasons, fans aren't going to be supporting him, and it'll make it a lot easier to cut bait and draft someone in the 1st or 2nd round going forward, and just slotting that person into the starting lineup.
And let's not be kind of coy around the fact that he's making $12.8 million this year. So
yeah, he's getting paid to be a legitimate top tier linebacker. So entering year 5, this is the time to prove it. He's no longer a kid. He's no longer a 20-year-old, 21-year-old. He's still young, very young by NFL standards, but it's now or never if he wants to end up having a long-term future with the Bills.
4 for 12 is on the Bills side of things. If we think he's going to get 4 for 12, I'm not 100% as the cap obviously aforementioned here goes up in balloons. I'm not exactly sure they're going to get 4 for 12 here. You look at CJ Mosley a couple of years ago, 5 for 85. Zach Cunningham, 4 for 58. And these are players that have had up and downs at times in this contract. Miles Jack, 4 for 57. Deion Jones, 4 for 57, especially signed a couple of years. I just don't see 4 for 50. I see 4 for 57 being kind of the floor, 14 to 15 range. I don't see the 12. I do believe the 12 would be the Bills winning. That's what he's getting paid now. So I don't see, and even more, that he'd be taking technically a reduction.
I got one last thing too. It just reading the comments about what ESPN story had about Tremaine, it sounds like those evaluating him are still using you can mold him into something, where one of the comments was how they think he's miscast as a middle linebacker, that he'd be stronger on the weak side. Mentioned his 4.5 speed and his size, and that the Bills could use him in different ways. To me, number 7 is people still being enamored by his skill set. It's not a true indication of where he actually is at this point of his career. And if I was going to see a ranking and take a ranking legitimately, I wish it would have been more based on what they actually think he's brought to the table, not what he could potentially bring to the table. And I think this ranking is a little bit too much based on that.
And lastly, Tremaine Edmonds is the 13th highest paid linebacker in the NFL and ranked 7th. It's not that crazy, like in terms of like he needs to play at least to that salary level, because the 7th highest paid linebacker in the league is Matt Judon at $16.5 million. So if he actually is the 7th best linebacker in the league, we're getting a little bit of value out of that at 12.7, not a crazy amount, but he's going to want, and if he is, he's going to want to play to at least a $15 million contract with probably some security there, not a 2 or 3 year deal. He's going to want 4. So you're probably looking at 4 for 60. I just don't see where else he would try to go with that. So 4 for 60, there's lots of examples of that contract being handed out a couple years ago. That's about what he's in line for. So the Bills could step up and do some finagling with the cap, maybe do something with it this year. They do have the option to that 12.7, get him on a signing bonus, extend it out throughout the whole thing, reduce it this year, maybe even reduce it next year, and have it a little bit higher in the final 2 years. So they can get witty if there is a move the Bills need to make for cap reasons. Someone gets hurt, they need to do something. There are a couple options there with Tremaine Edmonds and his cap. So that could play a role into it where they're like, you know what? We can make something happen here because it helps us now and next year, as well as keeps the player. So that is where I'm leaning with Tremaine Edmonds and the contract extension. I don't see it, but if he's willing to making 12.7 now, if he's willing to take 12, that makes things a little bit more interesting for the Bills going here this year and long-term, as they can kind of get witty and kind of get smart with the cap, especially if there's a move to make, as the Bills have been up against the cap before. And everyone's like, they're not going to make moves. They're not going to make moves. I mean, look at this Von Miller article, which we'll get into in a second, where Brandon Beane's been after Von Miller for years. And somebody that Brandon Beane wants, he goes and gets. Emmanuel Sanders, he tried trading for at the deadline. He tried trading for Von Miller. There's plenty of opportunities where he's been interested in a player and then went and signed them when they became free agents, just because he wasn't feeling the 2nd and the 3rd round draft capital. I do believe the Bills would trade probably fairly significant draft capital last year for Von Miller. Obviously, it wasn't a 2 and a 3. I bet you it was a 2. So what happened last year? They didn't have the pass rush they needed in the playoffs against Patrick Mahomes, as well as they did get to keep that pick, though, that will turn into, James Cook. So we'll see if the James Cook in a year later of Von Miller is better than having Von Miller half of a season earlier. But we'll get into that article in a second. Do have to talk about the DBs, Mike. Want to talk about the DBs briefly. We're going to start at corner in Trey White. So as we pull up the corner list, I don't know if you guys will be shocked if you've already read it, where you're at with that position group. But I'm going to read it from the top here. And we'll go Jalen Ramsey 1, no surprises. Marshawn Lattimore, fine. Jair Alexander, Xavier Howard, J.C. Jackson making an appearance, 5 from the Chargers. His big contract over there. Denzel Ward, Pat Surtain II from Denver, Marlon Humphrey coming in at 8, AJ Terrell, an unreal mention corner, real good for the Falcons. Trayvon Diggs makes the list as the 10th, and right after that, in 11th spot, oh man, is Trey White coming in, basically the next name with Darius Slay and Carlton Davis. Many could say that, especially the 3 of them, might be better than the last 3 on the list. So, Mike, Trey White coming in 11. Some recency bias there with the ACL, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that seems like a lot of disrespect, in my opinion, for a guy that has been regarded as one of the top corners in football over the past couple seasons. I get it. He tore his ACL during Thanksgiving. He missed the later stages of the season, and he might miss some time to open up this year. But to not be in the top 10 seems like a huge overreaction to that. And it's one of those things with these lists. Like, are you ranking based off of production from last season? Are you ranking based on overall ability, or are you projecting into the future? Well, we saw in one case with Tremaine Edmonds, it seems like you're projecting a player. And now in this case, maybe they're projecting again with saying they don't think Trey White will necessarily be as good of a player coming off this injury, or there's some uncertainties in that case. Some of those guys are very talented, but you can't tell me there's 10 corners in the NFL that are better than Trey White. You're not going to always be an all-pro caliber player every single season, but Trey White has consistently been a shutdown corner when given the opportunity in games. He takes on the number one guys and he plays at an elite level. I'm shocked that on a team that has gone to the AFC Championship 2 years ago, and then you saw what Kansas City did to the Bills this past season in the playoffs without Trey White in there, that he couldn't crack the top 10. It's shocking to me. Is it a big deal? No, but it's a little surprising.
And he comes in as the fourth highest paid corner in the league. I guess, would you know that? $16.5 million against the cap this season. So the fourth highest paid behind a couple of the guys on this list, and Jalen Ramsey, Marlon Humphrey. Shaquille Griffin's not on the list, but he comes in as the third highest ranked. Marcus Peters at fifth. Ronald Darby's making 12.8 against the cap for Denver. Seventh highest paid corner in the league.
Like, could have been Diggs here, like with Stefan's brother down in Dallas. Like, ton of interceptions, but are we really going to say he's a better corner than Trey White? No way. Like, I mean, if you're just talking coverage and ability, Trey White is the better player. Like, there's a bunch of guys on that list I would have had Trey White ahead of overall. And they're all good players. Aaron Quinn the other day was saying it's no slight. Like, the margin of difference between these elite players is minimal. So, yeah, I don't want to call out anybody on the list, but I got him at fifth. It's pretty simple. I got the top four is okay. I'm not going to beef too hard with Ramsey, Lattimore, Jair Alexander, and Xavier Howard. Those are probably the top four in some order. Trey White's next, though. Like, he's the fifth best corner in the league. It's that simple, regardless of the voting. His play will prove it. He's the fifth best corner in the league. He's right in J.C. Jackson's ranked fifth. It's better than J.C. Jackson, in my opinion, but he's right there. Denzel Ward, he's better than Pat Surtain. Pat Surtain has a big future, unranked rookie last year. He's 22 years old. So there's a big future there for him, as well as AJ Terrell as well. But Trey White right now is better than all of them. Marlon Humphrey, he's been good in stretches. He's had the injury bug bite him at times. But he does a lot of zero coverage with blitzes going on there. So he's a really good corner as well. But I have Trey White as the fifth best corner in the league. And Diggs should have been the one in the honorable mention slot. So that's kind of where I'm at. I feel pretty good about my ranking there that would have him fifth. Probably have J.C. Jackson sixth. It has to be the injury that dropped him. I agree with Jessica here. If he isn't hurt, he's in the top 10.
Yeah, just at least the NFL list of the top 100 admits it's just last year. That's very similarly to what they should have done here, especially with some of the early rankings at each of the other position groups. All right. Before we can't really talk about receiver and tight end, which would have been interesting, and even offensive tackle. We'll get into those next week. So we'll talk about the offensive side of the rankings. I know we talked about quarterback already today, but we'll get into the offensive side next week a little bit there. But we're going to talk about lastly here on the rankings list before we transition away is going to be the safeties. And this was a topic of conversation as well, almost maybe more so than the other units, where, yes, there's a very slim margin of error between them, but this one is very funny. You got Justin Simmons 1, Minka Fitzpatrick 2, fine. Kevin Baird 3, Derwin James 4, Buda Baker 5, Jesse Bates 6, Harrison Smith 7, Marcus Williams from the Ravens 8, Antoine Winfield Jr. 9th, good player. Jamal Adams 10th. Honorable mention, Holland from Miami, Diggs, Jeremy Chin, and Jimmy Ward. And then Jordan Poyer, Tyrann Mathieu, Adrian Amos, and Micah Hyde. So you got some names ahead of the Bills safety core. You got an All-Pro, you got a second-team All-Pro in Hyde, and you got a first-team All-Pro in Jordan Poyer. Mike, how are you feeling about this list? I mean, I have them both in the top 7, let alone both off the list.
Yeah, I think this list is blasphemous. You're talking about a first-team All-Pro player from last year and a second-team All-Pro. That means you were the best person at your position and then the second best person in your position. And it's not like being an All-Pro is the same as making the Pro Bowl team. Making a Pro Bowl is a joke. Anybody can make a Pro Bowl. You can be the 7th alternate and make a Pro Bowl. Being named an All-Pro means you are respected as the top at your position. To have 2 safeties be named to an All-Pro team in 1 year and have neither of them crack the top 10 safeties in the league is just, it's an abomination. Like, it's not something like I'm mad about. I don't really care about this list, but like, that's how you can tell a list is kind of a joke from the get-go. And I feel like with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, they don't get their fair due because they're such a good tandem. People wonder what would they be if they didn't have each other. And I get it. Like, maybe Micah Hyde isn't the same player, or maybe Jordan Poyer isn't the same player without Micah Hyde, but that's just the situation they've been given. They play on the same team. They know each other inside out, and they have tremendous chemistry. And yes, that helps them play much better on the field, but don't punish them just because they have that continuity and chemistry on the field. They're definitely top 10 safeties, and maybe previous years that wasn't the case, but they're one of the best safety duos in the league, if not the best safety duo, and they're both deserving of being top 10 rated safeties overall. There's a lot of great guys on this list, and I'm not expecting to have Poyer or Hyde 1 or 2 on any safety rankings list, but for them not to squeak in at like 9 or 10, or at least one of them squeaking onto this top 10, it just continues the narratives that they're overlooked. You watch broadcasts, and all the commentators give them love as a tandem and give them respect. So in a way, they do have the respect from a lot of people in the league. They have the All-Pro honors. But when it comes to these, like making a Pro Bowl or making a top 5, top 10 safety list, for whatever reason, they continue to get overlooked. And it's just not justified, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I got them both in the top 6, top 7. I just think it's the best safety combo in the league. It's the reason that I talked about Levi Wallace being a liability, because he has great safety play and a great corner on the other side, and even a great corner in the slot. Has to take on very limited, options. That's why I think that Kyer Elam is only going to come in and be just a completely nice addition to this roster, just because the addition over Levi Wallace will help mightily. And it's pretty sound across the defense. I'm really excited to see how the defense here turns out in, 10 days now, Mike, like 12 days officially till training camp next Sunday, right? So when
12 days.
Yeah, 12 days until training camp. We're going to be at training camp across all of the different Cover One networks. Really appreciate it from the Cover One podcast network. Please follow, please like, so that we can bring you the best content possible. It helps us, in the logarithms and everything else. So really appreciate that. But we're going to really do some crossover stuff here this season, as well as early as the next couple weeks. So look out for all of that and stuff as well. Great articles, Greg Vorse. We got Ryan writing as well. Sports Rock. We have a bunch of other great content up there. So make sure you do tune into and all of our premium content that's available. As our Slack channel is awesome too. So come and join the Bills community with informed Bills fans, not someone that's going to yell at you with an egg profile picture on Twitter. So as we go into the next chapter of the show,
Kev, can we just address this comment quick?
Yeah, we sure can.
So I don't know your opinion. I agree. The second time I've agreed with Jessica on the show about these lists. I get it. They are projecting to the future. They are taking things into effect. So I completely agree with that comment. And my thing, though, is it's not like Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer are ancient. there's still players at their age getting respectable contracts that are playing 2, 3, 4 more years. I get it that they're older, they've been in the league a while, but they're playing their best football of their careers at this current time. I just think it's a little bit speculative to say, well, just because they're 30 or around 30, that they're going to drop from being an all-pro to being a not top 10 safety in the league. So I agree with your comment. I just think if that's the case, then what's the point of even looking at these player rankings? Because you can have reasons for dropping almost anybody and elevating somebody that has no right to be where they're ranked. But I do agree with that. And then I just wanted to answer Vlad one more time. The people making this list are executives, players, coaches, some of them still in the league, some of them not in the league, across the NFL, who ESPN has been in contact with. And the last thing I want to say before we do move on, there was one more position, Kev. We didn't address it, but Von Miller was ranked the 6th best edge rusher in the NFL, according to these execs, players, coaches, which shows even at 33 has a lot of respect across to the NFL.
There you have it, everybody. Mike breaking down the entire process there at ESPN. But another article and another thing that had come out was the Von Miller article about his decision to sign in Buffalo and where he was at with his decision-making process and his career and kind of his feels and his feelings with basically very interested in Dallas at one point to sign his contract there that Randy Gregory was offered. Lots of good tidbits out of that basically he was in the bathroom, not sure what he was going to be doing, if he was actually even going to sign with Buffalo, if that was the right decision, that he might be more of a small town kind of guy based on some of the things there. He just finally put up his Club 47 house in Denver for sale. That was, his home and residence for a long, long time. He thought he was going to go back to Denver. They never made an offer. They went out and spent their money. He thought he was going to link up with Russell Wilson to run back in Denver. That never happened. They never called him, but Buffalo did. They've been the consistent piece. He thought Buddy Nix and crew was going to draft him 3rd overall. He thought it was a shoe-in. He has the Bills hat still on his dresser in Texas, in his house in Texas. He thought that was a lock to be a Buffalo Bill. He thought that it would go Cam Newton, Marcel Darius, and then him. And then it's always Buffalo has been after him. Brandon Beane's been trying to trade for him. They couldn't put a package together in the last couple seasons to bring him on over. And LA jumped him last year to get so that shows you how active Brandon Beane is come trade deadline. So never count out the need to maybe move some cap space around here for a final piece to this roster, Mike. But Von Miller's comments, what are your opinions on the fact that Bills have been courting him, that he's always kind of had a connection here from his draft process to signing that big deal to now being bought in and believing he's going to play out almost, if not all of those, most of those years on the contract?
So love that the Bills have tried to court him for seemingly his entire career, which is kind of funny that there's been these connections going back to the year he's been drafted. As far as his comments, I couldn't care less. I'm not offended. I'm not upset. I saw some people getting a little upset, some Bills fans being like, well, if you would have taken less money to go to Dallas, why did you come to Buffalo? I don't have that mentality. I know during the drought, we took offense to a lot of the slights that free agents and other people across the league would make at Buffalo. We don't need to get upset about that stuff anymore. All that really matters is that the Bills are the Super Bowl favorites and that one of the top free agents in the entire NFL, a future Hall of Famer, who is coming off a Super Bowl championship in Los Angeles, of all places, chose to come to Buffalo the first time he became a free agent in the NFL. That is more powerful than anything else that he could ever say. Am I offended that he would want to potentially go back to his hometown for less money? No, I'm not. And the truth of it is the full context of the quote didn't really come out. He said, I would be willing to take a discount to go to Dallas, but not that much of a discount. He was willing to go to the Cowboys, but they didn't pony up. He wasn't going to go there on an extreme discount. He still wanted to get paid, and the Bills stepped up to the table. And then the Denver comments, I completely understand. He was a Denver Bronco. If you read the article, it talks about the relationships he had with all the players on on Denver and how he felt at home. He had teammates over multiple days a week. He let certain teammates live at his place when they were transitioning to moving to Colorado and the Denver area. Even when he was in LA being Showtime, he said there was part of him that was missing. So I completely understand. You're told your old team that you spent nearly a decade with is going to try to acquire one of the top quarterbacks in football, and you think of yourself as one of the top defenders in football. Run it back, try to see what they can do. So I'm not offended by that thought process. Ultimately, he chose Buffalo. He's a crucial piece to this team, and I don't have any question that I completely expect his head to be in the right place, trying to help the Bills get over the hump and win a Super Bowl. I am not worried in the slightest, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, it's just as simple as us. So, maybe a lot of our listeners have ties to Buffalo or Western New York. Same thing for you, man. If you were a pro NFL player and Buffalo was offering you to come to play for the Bills, there might be a number less that you would take. I truly believe that. There would be that you to play for the Bills. You're just naive to think that that's not true. Now, if you get egregious amounts of differences between that Randy Gregory offer to the Von Miller real offer, there is a big gap there. If he had taken that and the Bills had come out and said, well, we just gave him this massive deal, $57 million guaranteed, 105, blah, 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 and he took a lesser deal, then that would be a story to me at that point, that he wasn't even willing to take a much better deal to come. That's the story. The story isn't that he pondered taking less money to go to Dallas. It wasn't even a realistic offer. Couple mil less guaranteed. They need to finagle the cap over in Dallas. Okay, that might have been what he meant. But I think that he had talked to Josh Allen previous years. I believe he said in 18 or 19, where they had said that they were going to link up sometime and win a Super Bowl. And it's now. I think he's always had ties to Buffalo. He's going to love his home. I think he went all the way down to a modest priced home right next to Sean McDermott. I mean, he's just going to embrace it, being on the field for the first time here on next Sunday in Rochester. And then, for the Monday night game against Tennessee week 2, he'll get to experience the crowd, still be under the lights week 1. It's different than the Stephon Gilmore years. It's different than the Marshawn Lynch years. It's different than the, keep going back as far as you want, the JP Lossman years.
Way different than Mario Williams. Like Mario Williams, premier rushers in the NFL. And he took the money to come to Buffalo. He was a good Buffalo Bill. He was productive, but it wasn't going to be the guy that put Buffalo over the hump to win it all. It was still a mediocre roster.
It was a marketing move. It was a marketing move.
Yeah. You look at the situation, like you said, Von Miller, a lot of people around him think that Buffalo is a perfect situation for him to hang low and chill and not be in a huge atmosphere where he's expected to be a Showtime type personality on and off the field. And going back to that article, the only thing that really was concerning was that it wasn't the Dallas comments. It wasn't the Denver comments. It was the fact that he did have some doubts before he came to the Bills facility. While he was on the plane, there was a mention in the article that he had thought, I might need to go up to Mr. Bean and Sean McDermott and tell them that I can't follow through with this. I can't sign the contract. That would have been a brutal blow if it happened, but it didn't. He came in. They said he went to the bathroom for 15 minutes, thought things out, eventually went through the meetings, went on the field, had time to take everything in, and it won him over. Even after we had all thought everything was all finalized, it still took some convincing by the Bills management, and that's just another reason to be confident in this staff and the guys that are running things in Buffalo, because with that uncertainty from Von, because he wasn't familiar with the Bills and everything outside of just stuff that he's heard, he comes here and he felt comfortable. That's a sign that should make all Bills fans comfortable, because it shows he was won over and that he feels like he's going to be a productive piece to the puzzle to taking the Bills to the next level.
And who hasn't? thought in the bathroom for 15 minutes. Like all of us have done that at some point of our life. I mean, I think about my life all day in the shower. Like, come on, like that's what it's for. Shower, bathroom, you're coming up with thoughts, you're coming up with ideas. I can't fault him for making a pretty huge decision. First free agency and last, most likely first and last.
Absolutely monumental.
First and last.
Yeah, I can't blame him. Who hasn't had a job offer at some point where they're wondering, do I take this? Do I move away from a place that I feel comfortable with? Like we love Buffalo. Obviously, we love Buffalo. We live in Western New York, but Buffalo is a far away city for a guy like Von Miller, who grew up in Dallas, played in Denver, recently in LA. And now you're going to, I'm not saying this to be disrespectful to the city of Buffalo. I love Buffalo. Like, it's my favorite place on earth. I grew up here. When I moved away for college in the beginning of my career, I came back home because I wanted to be back in Western New York, in this city with my family, my friends, everybody. But Buffalo can be a little bit like Siberia to people that don't know this area. It takes a little bit of getting used to the area in familiarizing yourself with the 716. And then a lot of people that once they give it a shot, they give it a fair chance, it wins you over. So hopefully Von right now is in the process of getting familiar with Western New York. And I really do think it's going to be a tremendous fit down the line.
Yeah, and what I also was alluding to with the Marshawn Lynch and Stephon Gilmore example, the Bills play with under the lights now the most. So it's not like you're going here and going to even, Jacksonville North. You're going to a place where you straight up are going to get seen. You're going to be on TV. You're playing with the third best quarterback in the NFL. Like, you have all of these criteria now that you didn't have before coming here to Buffalo. So you are playing LA week 1. You're playing Tennessee week 2, which is the number 1 team. Let's not forget it. They were the number 1 team in the NFL AFC last year. It just was what it was. So you have these monumental games under primetime. And then, you have KC a couple weeks later. You have Green Bay here Sunday Night Football. You have these monumental games. This isn't just like Miami, the Jets. You have these monumental games. You're not playing for 500 anymore. Can the Bills get to 7-9 or 8-9 now with the new schedules? No, like, you're playing for legitimate Super Bowl aspirations, seeding. Like, the Bills at some point halfway through the year last year got a little bit hairy with New England surging, but you're playing for seeding at points. You're playing for respect and notoriety. Stephon Diggs basically made a call, like, you're going to love it here. Like, I don't know. I got traded there. I wasn't the happiest man ever on the planet Earth. Got here, loved Josh Allen, loved his team, loved the community. And you have no better representation than stars that have no interest in leaving. Like, every other receiver got traded this year, including Tyreek Hill to Miami, to a lesser team. So you have all of these criteria pieces, the playing on big games, the team's good just in general, whether you played at 1 o'clock or not. The stars currently here, whether it's small-time guy Josh Allen with his story, big-time guy Stephon Diggs with his story, and anybody in between, Micah Hydes, the Jordan Poyer's coming over here and being his best version. And you have the whole criteria. I mean, you have Ed Oliver, also from Texas, brings his horses here. So you have all of these different pieces and culture that ends up working for a guy like Von Miller. So that's why ultimately, and his dad was, as you could see in some of the videos they put out, Von Miller's camp, his dad was as respectful and like, you should sign that contract as anybody in his area. So that was really cool to see. The Bills have all the pieces of the puzzle. It's not like Stephon Gilmore making comments anymore about, I need to play under the lights. Ironically, he was able to go and accomplish a few things over there. And then quickly that changed as soon as he left. And very shortly after, the Bills are now the team playing under the lights with the top quarterback, with a top offense, with now presumably the number 1 overall defense last year, adding Von Miller and Kaiir Elam all of a sudden, and a few defensive line pieces. And you have a really good, huge culture where one final trade move might be the year you see Brandon Beane dish that 2nd or 3rd round pick that he's been trying to dish at the deadline for a final piece of the puzzle, like the Rams did last season. What position could that be? Not sure at this stage. We'll get into that later on this season, but that is an opportunity for the Bills to get that done. As we talk about the defense, Mike, now, kind of the last topic we have jotted down here, the number 1 overall defense. They've been good in stretches. Levi Wallace has been masked. The pass rush has been masked at times. They've done some stuff to be creative with some of the best safeties in the league. We kind of kind of putting it all together here defensively. Leslie Frazier, real good coach in Buffalo, really well respected, has led some good defenses, has been overlooked in the head coaching search. Now, where are you standing? I think I tweeted last year at some point, can't remember, November, December, and I said he should be one of the number one contenders based on what he was doing with the Bills defense in stretches last year. And yes, the team struggled against the run, some of that scheme based, but what he's been able to do with some limitations, especially when Trey White went down, and especially with those linebackers in and out of the lineup at times, and some of the not having the premier pass rusher, this could be the year that pushes him over the edge with the number one defense adding in this talent. So where do you stand in all of that package, Mike, with Leslie Frazier and a head coaching job?
Yeah, Leslie Frazier should be an NFL head coach. Unfortunately, it brings about uncomfortable conversations about why he isn't an NFL head coach. And we're not going to go down that path today. But the fact of the matter was he was a head coach at one point, probably didn't get as long of an opportunity as what he might have deserved in Minnesota. He was a tremendous defensive coordinator before he became a head coach the first time around. I believe he did make the playoffs once with the Vikings, but didn't have a ton of success outside of that. This run that he's had with the Bills has been tremendous over his tenure in Buffalo. What's unfortunate for him is that a lot of it gets overlooked because Sean McDermott comes in as a defensive coordinator, a defensive-minded head coach, and he's going to get a lot of the credit for it because that's what he came in to be successful at. Secondly, you had some issues in the past about who was calling plays. Did McDermott take play calling duties away from him? And obviously Frazier got those back. And people are going to bring up 13 seconds as an opportunity where the biggest moment in your defensive coordinator career in Buffalo, you came up short. But the truth of it is, to be a head coach in the NFL often has more to do with your age and PR than it really does anything to do with who you are and what you know about the game of football. The fact of it is he had the number one defense in the NFL. He's one of the best defensive minds in football, but he's in his 60s, and NFL does not have a good track record of hiring minority coaches. If he was to get a head coaching opportunity, he probably would have had to do a David Culley type situation in Houston, where even David Culley did it as good as you could have ever expected in his one season in Houston, and he still got canned. And it's a tough situation for Leslie Frazier. At this point, I don't think he'll ever have another opportunity, whether that's fair or not. You hear players speak about him. They say he's a great leader of men, but you got to think of fan bases. What are fan bases clamoring for whenever there's a head coaching vacancy with their job? They want that young 41, 42, 43-year-old coach that's the next offensive guru that's going to have their team scoring 30 points a game and changing and innovating the game of football. You're not getting that with Leslie Frazier. You're going to have a good defensive mind who leads, who's a leader of men. But unfortunately, that's not what these owners are looking for. And he kind of misses out on opportunities that he deserves because of the way the league is run, unfortunately.
Yeah, look at, Sean McVay. I mean, it's all the McVay, kind of that fascination there. You have all types of different types of coaches that people are trying to hire along those lines. So I do believe that could be like in the way of Frazier being hired as that young offensive minded coach guy who's sprinting down the sidelines and can name you the play he called in 2014's whatever game. But I do believe that's kind of the motivation, the Cliff Kingsbury, this creative offense, this whole era of that kind of thing. But the Bills kind of didn't do that. They kind of hired, yes, Sean McDermott was on the younger end, youngish, and had a lot of experience, so kind of a career coach, mild defensive coach, mild-mannered, just completely like, culture early on in the culture. We were like that's kind of annoying. 2017, he kind of proved that like this team was pretty bad. Whaley drafted a few players, did leave some good players behind. Let's be honest, for Doug Whaley. Shout out to Doug Whaley. I thought he did a wonderful job at the end of his career more than in the beginning. He kind of got eager, spending big money, making big trades. Sammy Watkins, before you needed Sammy Watkins. He went and got Sammy Watkins, but leaving some players behind. His crew did a great job in free agency that year. Jordan Poyer, we talked about already on the show, and others, as well as a big draft that year, as well, hitting on some really talented guys in 17, right into Bean, who was able to kind of furnish that little bit of quality and quickly traded that aforementioned Sammy Watkins away into building a roster and that culture. So I think that immediately right then and there, his culture started to show like this team wasn't very good. They were winning in weird ways. It was kind of like that baseball team, like that's winning 8 games in a row. They were beating the Falcons on the road after a Trey White touchdown. Trey White, another guy from 17 we've talked about on the show here tonight. So it all is kind of put together with the Leslie Frazier debate, where I do think at some point someone's going to say, comes from a winning team. I think he can instill what they did in Buffalo here. He's a leader of men. I'm still not. This is his last real shot to me after this season. If the Bills go far and or all the way with this defense, I do believe he's going to be able to become a head coach in the league. And John, really appreciate you for the super chat. I envy you being behind an enemy line. Sometimes it feels that way for me here in the 585. Sometimes, believe it or not, as close as we are, before the Bills were good, Rochester can tend to be a bandwagon area, especially as you keep going eastbound a little bit further from Buffalo. You have Dolphins and Giants and 49ers and Cowboys fans. It's pretty Patriots too here. I like to say Rochester is like 50% Bills and 50% the entire NFL. So there probably still skews a little bit Bills, but there is still a contingent of people that don't have the culture. There's a lot of losing there lately, especially as some of these kids and even 20s and 30-year-olds had to experience lots of losing. So they had to go to their uncle's team down in New York or whatever the case may be. So I can kind of totally relate to that, John, in truth of being trapped behind enemy lines.
Hey,
Not quite like that.
I have the respect too. I lived in Ohio for 5 years. I dealt with so many Browns fans who would brag that their team was better, even though the Browns were just as bad as the Bills for so many years in the drought. Dealt with Bengals fans, Steelers fans. Steelers fans might be the worst fan base I've ever dealt with, because all they do is tell you every day how great their history is. And you can't really argue with them, because for 50 plus years, they have been amazing. At least the Patriots fans, they have nothing before Drew Bledsoe in the mid 90s for the most part, and then lived in Colts country for a little bit. So yeah, a lot of respect for you, John. Appreciate the super chat, and Bills Mafia is always looking out for you down there.
Yeah, and you got, like, come on, out of all the places, that's where you get some Bills fans down there. Like, kind of like to the Steelers point. Like, we would come, I would go to the Steelers game as a season ticket holder a lot of times at CV Johnson drop game, and it was like 80% Steelers fans, man. It was just a bad era.
I was there too. Tough.
Yeah,
Tough
I mean, it was a bad era. We were close. I was in the lower 100s for this game, and I jumped onto the way onto the field. Like, there was like 100 people like almost storming the field if CV Johnson. I'm not kidding. This isn't a joke. There was people ready to run on the field to beat the Steelers to go to like
a meaningless game. You know what? I'm
6 and 10.
I'm kind of embarrassed about this. I jumped into like my dad's arms because like I was just like, we beat the Steelers, and had a Steelers fan like hit me on the shoulder and be like, yo, he dropped the ball. I was like, are you kidding me? Because I just looked away once I saw the ball dropping into his arms. I was like, there's no way he's not catching this. And yep, it happened. So respect to you, John, and any Bills Mafia members that are living in enemy territory right now. We know it ain't easy, but hopefully this helps you guys, and always enjoy talking Bills football with everyone all over the place.
Yeah, and look forward to the crossover content. Like I mentioned before, we have a show coming at 9 p.m. here with Eric Turner. This week on the Film Room is with Ryan Bates. He's going to tell you about his RFA story, what's going to happen there in terms of what went through with all his offers, and was one of the most coveted RFA players in a while. We had an internal debate at Cover One about if the Bills misplayed that or not. Lots of evidence where they did, lots of evidence for, well, doesn't really happen this way often. So there's definitely, internally we had some talks, but make sure you check out Ryan Bates and his interview and last week as well with Mitch Morse here on the Cover One podcast network. But great content coming as soon as next week, with a lot of next weekend and into the following week of training camp with a lot of the Going Deep podcast, Mike and myself. You're going to get Air Raid Hour. You're going to get the Roundup. You're going to get Cover One Buffalo. You're going to get the film room. You're going to get the multitude of our podcast and video and live content and our mashups and mix-ups, as well as our articles and really cool written stuff. The Brandon Bean series is up there right now, how he stacked his contracts to flexibility offensively too. You got Kyle Salagi up there with ranking Buffalo Bills GM's best and worst moves on the Roundup, a couple yesterday. So you got a lot of good content on there. You got disguised coverage with Ant. He's going to be on the show tonight, and all of his content that he produces as well. Shout out to him too, for his crossover content that we'll be making as well. So Mike, 12 days. What are you looking forward to the most? Just that atmosphere. What are you feeling as I just said, that kind of group gets together, kind of starts to create some crossover content as I put the show schedule together for the season, and our guests from Ty Rauch from Let's Talk Jets to Mark Schofield from the Patriots pulpit, to Jenna Harner from Steelers coverage, beat coverage writer over there, former Buffalo. What are you feeling like? How is it feeling now as we get into the meats and potatoes of July?
Yeah, I'm just feeling anxious. I'm ready for this all to get underway. Like you said, a lot of nice things coming up with Cover One. The Saturday night before training camp starts, we're going to be at Uncle Jumbo's in Buffalo. A lot of us getting together for a good time. That Sunday, we're going to be in St. John Fisher. I believe, Kev, you're going to be there. I'm going to be there. We're going to be there for the first camp. And then, like I said, have a good time at camp and then some good times outside of camp. And then it's really just the countdown to the preseason and in games where you can actually start seeing what the guys are doing on and off the field. I'm just happy to have football back. It's fun to have the St. John Fisher experience, take that in, go to the stadium a few times in August. It gives you that football fix while still enjoying the summertime. It's a great time of the year in Western New York. And then before you know it, it's going to be fall, and we're going to have football 5 days a week. You're going to have your Monday night game, your Thursday night game, your Saturday. You're going to have your Saturday college football games, and then Sunday with the Bills. So we're close to the best time of the year. So I'm feeling that anxiousness and really just counting down till the Bills are back.
And we're going to be your recap show on some of those Monday nighters. So we're going to be here for that Monday night week 2. We're going to be your recap show. We're going to be take live reactions here. Tuesday is the first show here to kind of talk about the game, especially week 2 against the Titans. So we might have some fun stuff planned for that reaction show, as Tuesdays can come around, or it could be kind of a pregame show for a Thursday night game. So lots of good content is still to come. We'll see how it all plays out with our guest schedule, but I'm looking forward to dropping some real good names officially in the next month or so, or a month or two, on exactly how the show schedule will turn out with guests. So look forward to bringing those on. But make sure you head over at 9 p.m. Eastern for for the content of the Cover One Film Room with Eric, with Kendall, as well as with Ant and Ryan, Rick Bates, to kind of go over through that. But from the Cover One podcast network and the Going Deep podcast, Kevin Masseri, Mike Bunt will be here live with you next Tuesday for part 4 of the training camp series. And at that stage will be 5 for the 4th and final phase of the countdown to training camp. So tune in next Tuesday at 7. Also, we appreciate anybody listening on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, as well as Spotify and other podcast networks. Kevin Masseri, Mike Bunt, we'll catch you guys soon, and we'll catch you at training camp. Anybody else, look forward to seeing you soon.
Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
Fridays to me, talking about the Bills. What else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
right now I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play action.